I would like to welcome everyone to our adult education at Dunbarton this morning, where we are going to hear from an unusual artist who has a environmental sensitivity that we will be able to see. And to introduce him, I'm going to call on Joe Friebele. Joe?
Thank you, Shirley. Well, I've known Billy for all his life, and in recent years, I should say he was a philosophy major at St. Mary's when he was in college and an art minor. And he has managed to put those two disciplines together into some very unique and challenging for the viewer and the participant, challenging works. And he's a tenured professor at Loyola University in Baltimore, and he never ceases to amaze me and Elaine and many of the people that he shows his works to. So I'm happy to introduce him. Billy, take it away.
Thank you. So I'm sorry to not be there in person, and originally the plan was to have artwork on the walls for us all to look at. Unfortunately, I was struck by a car this week. I'm okay, but not able to drive, and starting the healing process. Thank God it wasn't worse. And so I'm happy that we have this Zoom technology so I can still connect with you all. The last time I spoke with Adult Ed, I believe it was in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, and I was zooming in from Ocean City at that point. So it's nice to come back and be here again via Zoom, but with a totally different set of works and ideas to discuss with you. So I'll just go ahead and jump in. Thank you for that introduction, Dad. It's interesting when you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because yeah, I have two scientists for parents, physicist and biologist, naturalist, and that had a big influence on me. When I went to undergrad, I veered into art and philosophy, pretty far away from science as you would think, but I believe that influence never left, and really those things aren't so far apart as what I'm coming to find out. So today I'm going to talk to you about a body of work that has kind of emerged over the last year. So this project started in 2020 with a flash flood. I was sitting in this same seat that I'm sitting in now. I was looking out the window and I was teaching my students, and a thunderstorm came through and I heard screaming from the streets. I ran down and I saw cars half submerged with water, things floating down the street. And I looked towards my house. I have a garage that is below ground level, and I saw the water just rushing down into that garage where my art studio is. And when I went down there, I found 3 feet of water and all of my tools and some of my artworks floating in the water. And so with that disruptive act, I decided I needed to understand what was going on. Why did this happen to my house? My house was sort of where all the water went. And so I started to research the pathways of water and the history of that. And also, this is a map here that I found from my local municipality of the storm drain system. And so I realized there's a drain in my studio, and in that drain connects to the storm drain system. It runs out to the street. And I had, I've lived here for 7-8 years. I had no clue that there was this pathway of water that connects me to a larger entity. I started to look at larger maps to understand that storm drain system funnels into one big underground tunnel, which is not built for the capacity of water that falls these days, and is flooding a lot of neighborhoods in our area. And then in looking at the larger stream system, I got intrigued with this sort of almost brain-like looking system of veins that connect each other, and they all sort of end up in the same place, which is the Anacostia River. So digging deeper, I looked at the Library of Congress to find this map from 1891. I just thought it was, first of all, just a visually really striking map, really kind of interesting in its format, this really wide, large format, obviously done by hand. And then if you look closer, you see that this area in red, this was a proposed channel where they were going to wipe out all the wetlands in this area to make room for large ships to be able to come into Washington, D.C. And you can see the depths there. We've got sort of 60, 30, 50, things like that. Keep that in mind. Looking further upstream to closer to where I live, you can see all of this area is where tobacco, all this kind of gray area is where tobacco was planted. And that was one of the largest problems, because when colonialists came in, wiped out all of the vegetation around the river and planted, cash crops, monocultures, that led to a ton of erosion and the river basically filling in. So here you see, again, the depths are in the 30s, 40s, even all the way up here to Bladensburg, you can see that they're pretty deep. So looking even further back in time, I found a statistic that said that the Native American tribes, the Nakacheng, and there's that name is even butchered and sort of colonialized from this more complicated term that I have on the screen that I'm not going to try to pronounce because I don't think I can do it justice. But anyway, that they had lived on this land for 10,000 years, which I believe is probably an under calculation, but that's an average, before the Europeans showed up in the 1600s. And I found this stat to be pretty alarming. And I just the numbers were just, hard to fathom in my mind. So I sat down to try to depict that and understand that relationship of time, right? How long one group had lived on the river and the next group had come in and pretty much destroyed the river in a very short course of time. Because the Anacostia River has been called the Forgotten River. It's been one of the most polluted rivers in the world, or in the country, I should say. Now it's doing much better, but all that has happened in this short. So basically what you see here, just to make it clear, is that the red area is the amount of time that the Europeans have occupied the river, and the black area is the amount of time that Native Americans have lived on this land. And you see they're sort of depicting faces, right? And they're coming together to form something that looks like waves or ripples or rivers, water waves. And so that's sort of my process. I like to do research ahead of time and soak it all in, and then let the research guide how I make things. And this is an image from an exhibition I had at Loyola University where I teach. And what you can see, so this right here in the frames are those ink pieces about the Native Americans. And the depth of the river is actually mapped with this neon, or not neon, but it's an LED light.
You ever see Billy Friebele?
Yep, I'm here.
He's about to talk. He's an artist, and he talks about the.
You get the paper already?
Oh, hello.
Is this adult?
Okay, so what I did here is basically allow the current depth of the river to influence the way that I hang the show. So I put this LED light on the wall, and then I forced myself to adapt to that line and install the show based around that. So you could see actually what you're looking at up here at the top of this wall is the current depth near Capitol Hill. So you can see it's pretty shallow compared to what we were seeing on that map. And I ended the LED light in this corner, and there just happened to be a trash can there, and I couldn't resist putting the LEDs right into the trash can, because literally that's kind of where this project started, with my garage being trashed, and also just all of the trash that flows straight into the river when we leave it on the streets. So the other thing I started to do, I wanted to understand the river from multiple perspectives. I volunteered to be a citizen scientist with my son, my trusty helper here, and we would go out during COVID and take water quality samples at different points along the river. And this really helped me to understand the ebbs and flows and the history and the things that contribute to the way that the river are, all the intricacies of it. Here you can see August 31st, the E. coli results are in the 24 or above, really 24,000. They're supposed to be down around 400. So we've got, it's currently in the areas close to my house, not safe to go into the water. And you can see how that effect has happened on a longer time scale to the right, which is a 2-year average. So there's some concerning areas, if you're not aware, in the Arboretum. The Hickey Run is extremely polluted for some reason, and it just tips the scales every week. They're still trying to figure that one out. So I learned a lot from this. Here you see, like, again, that 2-year average, and this orange line down here is anything under that is acceptable to go into the water. So you see that it's not often that we really get to a place where the bacteria levels are low enough to go in the water. Washington Channel seems to be the safest bet, and that's partly because the Potomac is meeting the Anacostia at that point. So all of this stuff was great and helped me to understand it, but I needed to make something of my own to understand further and engage with the river. So I designed this tool, which was a camera system that floats. So it's 2 waterproof cameras that go above and below the water surface. And Elizabeth Gross is a philosopher, and she says, invent machines not for what we can do with them, but for the ways in which they transform us beyond even our control. And so this piece, I'm basically using a fishing line, and partly that helps disguise me, because if I just look like a fisherman, hopefully nobody will come mess with me or give me a hard time for doing weird things on the river. And I basically cast it into the river and let it float around. I find it interesting to see what patterns it follows. There's all of these flows, and depending on the tide and the wind direction, it's going to do its own thing. And I'm kind of interested in allowing it. I want to basically amplify the voice of the river and see what that does. So these are some of the images that first came back. And I was just excited because I didn't see that fish from above. It was too murky. And you can see how it's mirroring the image of the fish under. So basically I flipped the video upside down because I found that if you have it the other way, we're so accustomed to viewing landscapes from that perspective that it kind of just reinforces this humans on top view. And I was really interested in inverting that relationship, looking at kind of what it would be like to be from an aqueous creature perspective. And so you can see that there's reflections happening on both sides, right? Like the top of the water is reflecting the landscape. The bottom of the water is also reflecting. I mean, you're probably familiar with this if you swim in pools, right? That you can always see kind of the reflection in the surface of the water both ways. But, here we have basically orange construction fencing, not a particularly scenic spot on the Northeast Branch, but the underwater view I just found so kind of mesmerizing. I just was like, this is a really interesting visual. That compelled me to kind of dig deeper. And things like this really drew me in. This is just a little trickle of water, but seeing it from the underwater perspective with the bubbles and the drips impacting the surface of the water, I was so interested in that. And how just simply flipping them upside down really made it very strange, kind of refreshing and almost poetic. So I decided, from these results, I'm going to pursue this further. And how far can I take it? At the same time, I was doing a lot of reading. One book that was really impactful because of the underwater views is Robert McFarlane's The Underland. I don't know if anyone's read it. If I was in a room, I'd love to see if anybody's read it, but it's a great book. He spends 10 years going to the deepest parts of the earth that he can find, and he writes in this very poetic, interesting way. And in it, he references Amitav Ghosh, who writes in The Great Derangement, sort of 3 challenges. One is how to represent unfoldings of actions and consequences within deep time, which was something I was trying to do in the piece about the Nacotchtank Native Americans. How to recognize the aliveness of the more than human world, which I found I was trying to do by using the cameras underwater, and how to come to terms with the profound decentering of human presence. And through this project, I really started to think a lot about how we divide ourselves from the natural world, and it's something we've been doing for a long time. And we've actually done that with humans as well in order to subjugate them and to use them for profit. So we have this way of kind of logically separating ourselves from the animal kingdom, from the insect kingdom, from races that we want to dominate. And then we rationalize this air of superiority in order to do that. So through this project, I was hoping to sort of re-engage and decenter that hierarchy a bit. So my challenge was basically, I had a residency at the Capitol Hill Arts Workshop in the wintertime. And so I would take this camera system out and float it around. And my goal was to go from my house down to Capitol Hill. And along the way in the winter, you know, there's not a lot happening. It's cold. A lot of things have hibernated or migrated. But there was a lot of waterfowl, and they were all pretty wary of me with my weird device and my fishing pole out there. I was really the only person out there, and they would always kind of give me the side eye, and I would always want to capture them with the camera, but they never let me. And so I started looking up research on this and found that, you know, they have eyes obviously on either side of their head that gives them a panoramic viewpoint. They also have very poor what's it called? I'm blanking on the term. Like a focal length. Like they can't see things right in front of themselves very well, but they are able to zoom in really well. So I tried to replicate that by taking this curved mirror and indenting it and putting a mirrored steel ball on top of that, and then putting feathers around it. Just kind of a playful way of trying to engage with that sense of seeing. So when you're in the gallery, as you walk around, you see almost like a funhouse mirror. You see yourself in different ways. Even in the center ball, you can see yourself reflected. Another thing I saw quite a bit were water striders. And in this piece, I used the mirror. Again, the mirror is like a stand-in for the reflective surface of the water. And I learned that the water striders, that their front feet are basically what they use to grab other insects that fall into the water that can't swim. And they are able to float by sort of holding air bubbles onto the hairs of their feet. And so this was kind of another playful way of dealing with that. I obviously, like, their front feet are not that long, but they are super fast in human terms. I can't remember what the calculation is, but they're extremely fast for the insect world. So I wanted to give them kind of this air of superpowers. And in the end, I think it kind of looks like the Vitruvian Man to some degree. And originally there's nothing on the mirror, but actually my basement flooded again in the summertime. And this piece was completely submerged in water. And so I decided to just go with that and let it be dirty, and let the backed up not sewer, but storm drain water live on this piece. So this piece will be slowly rusting and changing over time. So the last time I spoke with Adult Ed, I talked about this piece, which was at the Krieger Museum, which was basically a mirror that was coated in ink, and then I wiped away these patterns. And that was an interest in the echo chamber and modes of communication, how they kind of lock us in. But the interesting, and I think that was a very dark body of work in some sense. It was in the middle of the Trump era. It was also in the middle of COVID. And obviously we were dealing with a lot of politically and social just horrors, really. And I was thinking a lot about how technologies of communication kind of control us and lock us in. But, after studying the water striders, I realized that I had no idea that actually they communicate with each other through something called ripple communication. They're able to move their feet and kind of send out these signals, and that they are able to understand each other to some degree in almost like a Morse code sense. And so I kind of thought, oh, this would be interesting to re-engage with this piece because it's very much similar in terms of visual. And so in that show that I showed earlier, I put that piece next to the water striders. And just to kind of go back to that work just briefly here, partly because I was going to hang these on the wall at Dumbarton. But these were the pieces that were at the Krieger. It was sort of this piece first, which was an image from the 1600s about sort of how to project one's voice. And then I had sort of building concentric circles until it becomes kind of extreme. So anyway, back to the work in this show. This was another video I took in that winter, and it was at the end of a day. I'd been recording and I didn't really think much of it. And then I started to notice these little minnows that were kind of checking out the camera. And this pairing of like this industrial scene behind it and these sort of delicate little minnows that were kind of swimming in and out of the algae and checking out my camera, I thought was really kind of intriguing. The video playing okay? Great. The other thing about this work is that it just makes me slow down. I have to sit in a place for a long period of time. I have to pay attention. I can't be on my phone really. I have to just be in tune with what's happening. And I find the videos, for me at least, kind of do the same thing. So I always call my mother after I go out because I need help identifying all of this stuff. So she said that these were mummy chug fish. This was a piece that I created at Capitol Hill Arts Workshop without all the electronics around it. It was I was interested in this idea of a school of fish. So and how that they communicate with each other. There's no leader, right? And they actually have sort of like sensory receptors that respond to their neighbors. And so I wasn't really happy with the way that it was looking as just a sculpture. These are actually 3D prints of fish, and this is all algae on a mirror underneath. And so I hooked up a bunch of LEDs to it and sensors to kind of replicate that idea of like a decentralized network that one fish might make a turn and then others will react to it. So this is LEDs and photo transistors, which are basically sensing the amount of light that is there and turning on if they reach a threshold of light. So, and at first I was going to try to hide all these wires, but then I started to feel like the wires were looking a bit like ripples in the water. And also I just like this idea that we think of these swarms as being, or these schools as being so simple, but really just to even make a very sort of poor representation of the complexity of that system is incredibly complicated, right? And I'm really kind of interested in the overlaps between the digital world and the natural world, and how a lot of our systems are kind of based on or mirror these natural systems. So another book that was helpful was Jussi Parikka. He actually wrote a book called Insect Media that was really interesting. It's all about how insects are very similar to digital things. But this one is from A Geology of Media. He says the underground lies at the crux of the technical imaginary of modernity as both the place of hell, mining and extraction, and a place of technological futures. So if you really think about it, all these devices, even what we're on right now, they're all driven by things that we dug, down deep into the earth to find. And as these cameras were going around, I saw a lot of root systems, and it was just fascinating to see them underwater and really get up close to them. And when they're in water, they're almost like in a suspended animation. And so I collected some of these roots. I poured water with sediment from the river onto these gold papers. And then I took apart USB cables and spliced them with the roots to make these pieces, because I really think there's a pretty clear connection between these networks that we set up and the kind of networks of plants, right? There's also Susan Simard is a biologist who also wrote about the wood wide web, right? The mycorrhizal fungal networks that are exchanging signals and nutrients underground all the time. So the more we learn, the more we see that we are much more intertwined than we think. And so this project has kind of started to take on different lives as it goes into different exhibition venues. I recently had a show at the George Mason University gallery in Arlington, Virginia, and they had 3 screens, and so it forced me to kind of edit these videos to match the format of the screen. And then one other experiment I started to do was to take the data set of the videos that I recorded. So I took about 50 screenshots of the videos and I fed them to an AI. And what you're seeing in the middle is the AI taking that data set and trying to recreate what it looks like above and below water. And the way it works is there's 2 networks. It's called a generative adversarial network. And so one, it's trying to replicate it, and the other network is telling it if it's doing a good job or not. So you see, it started out pretty bad, and then as it starts over time, it's starting to kind of match some of the textures of the foliage and some of the water. You can see it kind of parsing out that the water is a different color. Honestly, I don't really know what it's doing. This is a program that is built for artists. You can just feed images and play around with it. But I just found the images so kind of mysterious and eerie, but also kind of beautiful in a strange way. And I started to think, so I was doing all this research about what other creatures perceive, right? And like we're one of the few creatures that don't see ultraviolet rays. And so our perceptions are so limited. If you think about when I walk my dog along the river, the things that he smells and the things that he hears are just so much far beyond what I could perceive. So I was thinking of the AI as kind of a stand-in for this beyond perception that we cannot reach, right? That other creatures have. Because really the AI is able to, crunch data much faster than we can. And it's able to do things that we can't do, frankly. So again, back to that sort of overlap between nature and digital culture. So these are some pieces that I printed out some of the AI images, and then I took sediment, water, and algae from the river and mixed it with paint and put it on a mirror to create this tension between the AI image that's in the center square and the actual natural materials that are on the outside. So you get this kind of interplay between a very digital image and what it's trying to create, which is the natural textures. So, and you can see I've coated it in resin, so it has this kind of dripping edge on it. And it's a very difficult, I wish it was in the hall there, because these are so difficult to reproduce because they're essentially mirrors and they're very shiny. But once you're in front of it, as you move, the light plays off of it and the mirror actually illuminates it from behind. So like down here below, you see kind of algae collected around the bottom. You kind of get the sparkle of that from behind. And then I've been playing around with different, so at the show at Loyola, I tried to just kind of replicate this view of the AI in the middle and the natural around it, in a video sense. So here is a projector with the image with the video I've been showing you, and a small monitor with the AI playing over top of it. Oh, I forgot that was a video. So you can kind of get a sense of what that plays like. And part of it is like, even when we go into nature, we're never really able to get into nature, right? We're always have our phone there. We're taking pictures. There is a box in front of us at all times. Even if we're not holding it, we're thinking about it, right? Or maybe we're thinking, oh, this would look great on Facebook if I took this picture. It's really hard for us now to actually enter into that natural space. So thinking about how those relationships evolve. This is the 3 screens I was talking about. So we had 3 of the still pieces and but I had to hang these TVs in a vertical orientation, which was fun, kind of a trick, but it also inverts the way that you usually look at a TV. So outside the gallery, there's kind of this jumbotron. And so I ended up putting 6 of the videos, and it's just in public space. So as you walk by, a lot of people walking their dogs, it was just playing in the background. And so, yeah, this is the project that I just hung out is called Sentient River. And again, my interest is really in a journey for myself. I've lived in this area most of my life. I've engaged with the river, but I haven't really woken up to the fact that, all of our actions are kind of affecting this natural space, and also that there's just amazing things that happen on the river. I guess that's what I'm waking up to, is that it's just this truly like magical place. So David Abrams in The Spell of the Sensuous, this really resonated with me, because I think that when we're not able to see things or think about them, it's easy for us to just ignore them and mistreat them, right? So as long as we experience the invisible depths that surround us as empty space, we will be able to deny our thorough interdependence with other animals, the plants, and the living land that sustain us. Our disconnection allows us to dump toxins into empty space, right? And here he's talking about air, because like we literally can't see pollution, so we don't really think much about it. But I think the same is true of water. So I think I have about 5 minutes left for questions. I'll just wrap up. The title Sentient River was also intertwined with the Maori tribe in New Zealand. I don't know if Graham's here, but I wanted to give a shout out to him. That the indigenous Maori tribe won 160-year legal battle to give the river rights. And their saying was, "I am the river is me." So now anybody who harms the river can be sued by the river. And so that's an interesting kind of turnaround. These are some of the water quality resources that I've used, and I'll just put my contact on the screen in case. Please feel free to reach out. I love speaking with Dumbartonians. It's some of the smartest people that I ever get to talk to about art. So always happy to have your thoughts